Stand by for the Brewery Underground podcast.
In Asheville's harbor wise, cracked and bruised beneath the skies. Stephen Scott, they lead the way. Brewery Underground, night and day. Raise your glass, let's ignite. In this city, we unite. Raise your glass, let's ignite.
Well, hey, everybody. I'm Steve, and of course, he's Scott. And yes, we are the Brewery Underground podcast. And, Scott, we take on a lot of different avenues sometimes here on the podcast. Sometimes we talk beer. Sometimes we talk about breweries, and we talk about, rating beer. Well, today we're going to be talking about malts. And the guy to do that with us is Brent Manning. He is the co-owner and co-founder of Riverbend Malt House in one of the best brewery towns in America, Asheville, North Carolina.
The best brewery town in Lyon County.
Yeah, the best.
Kind.
I would die on that hill.
Brent, thanks for
welcome
today, man.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, before we hit the record button, we were talking about a great many things involving, water and things that you guys do and for breweries. And I'm really curious, Riverbend Malt House for people, our audience. I know I started researching this a couple of weeks ago when we knew we were going to have you on. Let me just say that your website is such a plethora of great information, and hopefully we're going to do a lot of education for people once we get done with this podcast today. But in kind of simple terms, can you give an overview of what Riverbend Malt House is?
For sure. So we're a craft malt house, like you say, located in Western North Carolina. And what we do is we bring locally sourced barley, wheat, rye, oats, corn, etc., into the malt house and put it through a 3-step process: steeping, germinating, and kilning, to create a variety of different malts that are used in brewing and distilling. And to kind of step back and define malting, what we're basically doing is managing the enzymatic digestion of the cell walls that are inside each and every kernel of barley, corn, wheat, rye, whatever, and managing that conversion process as they convert to a starch or simple sugar. And so obviously we kind of set the table for brewers and distillers by making these starches and simple sugars readily available for the mashing process. The coolest thing about making malt is, these 3 steps are the same regardless of scale. We're one of the larger craft malt houses in the nation. We're going to produce about 5 million pounds a year, which sounds like a lot until I tell you that Sierra Nevada, Mills River, takes in about 1 million pounds a week when they're processing it full bore. We, even at that eye-popping clip of 5 million pounds a year, we're a rounding error for what the craft beer community looks for just in the Southeast. So it's a pretty wild topic to wrap your head around. Most of the southeastern states grow about 500,000 acres of small grains, and we only need probably a couple thousand acres to supply the malt house with those grains.
Brent, and this was one of the things as I was kind of researching you guys and stuff, is malt, I'll let you tell me, are malt and grain the words kind of synonymous, or are they 2 different things? Malt kind of makes up the grains, right? Or grains make up malt?
Grains, we take grains to make malt, and we can malt a lot of different things. So I can malt pumpkin seeds if you send them to me. It's really, the mechanics are the same. We're just essentially tricking the plant into growing by creating the perfect conditions for that growth to take place. If you're a gardener, who's ever taken like tomato seeds and put them in a wet napkin in a plastic bag to get that jump on that spring crop, it's the same mechanics. We're just hydrating a seed to a certain level, typically around 45% moisture, keeping the temperature and humidity in place to allow that plant to continue to grow. And the trick is, though, as maltsters, we don't want to let the plant actually begin to photosynthesize. So we're just wanting that early growth, that sort of starch reserve that the plant uses to kickstart its growth and get up through the soil. And before it can begin to photosynthesize, that reserve is what brewers and distillers are tapping into to then eventually feed yeast. We want to feed
And is that
instead of the plant growth.
okay? Is that process? Is that germination?
Yes. Yeah. So
Okay.
steeping, germinating, and kilning are our three main steps. And it takes about 7 days to execute that process, regardless of scale. So we'll do a 2-ton floor malt batch or a 10-ton, what we call GKV batch, or a germ kiln vessel. Now our friends at the larger malt houses will do 250 to 500 ton batches. Process is the same. Barley doesn't care how many of its friends it's surrounded by.
Okay. There's a picture on your website, and it's probably one of your malt houses or warehouse or something where it's spread out on the floor, right? And I think it even says something about you guys still kind of hand rake the thing out there. Talk about that process. Is it because when you see the picture, it looks like maybe there's a certain level or a certain amount or certain depth to that all the way across. There's probably some science behind that, right? So they do what they're supposed to do correctly?
For sure. Well, floor malting was where we started. Our first Malt House 1.0, we had a massive 1-ton batch, which is ridiculously small. But we did it all floor malted. We were just trying to understand the processes and the nuances of making malt. And the best way to learn that is by floor malting. You're literally in touch with the grain every day. You spread it out on about a 4 to 6 inch deep bed. The germination process continues on. You've got a nice, cool, humid room. The rootlets, as they begin to grow, kind of bind up. And they call it felting. And we'll pull a rake through that material 3 times a day, morning, mid-afternoon, and late evening, gently breaking that felted material apart, mixing the grain that's in the bottom to the top, getting some fresh air in there. And basically what's happening is we're keeping the grain kind of under control by doing that. If that felted layer on top continued on, it would basically act like a blanket and lock in all the heat that's a byproduct of that germination state. So even if the room's 60 degrees Fahrenheit, the bed temps can hit 100 Fahrenheit quite easily. Wow. And so at that point, you've got all the building blocks for some pretty nasty things to start growing, molds, etc. And so we really want to make that raking event happen in a steady cadence and keep everything nice and cool in there. And you get this nice sort of sinusoidal wave of the heat building, the rake occurs, and then it drops back down. And this is kind of one of the key differences between floor malting and what we call pneumatic malting. Is pneumatic malting at larger scales is basically a uniform temperature throughout. Floor malting, you kind of get this rise and fall. And researchers think that that's part of the differentiating factor of what makes floor malt taste different, is you've got this sort of rise and fall that may favor different enzymes versus the standardized sort of, this is the temperature, it's 62 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 days, and that's all there is to it, So floor malting is kind of the historic deal as well. I mean, that's how people made malt long before we had the Industrial Revolution. And so malt houses of old were vertical. And so the malt would take one trip up, steep in a tank, drop down into one floor. It would go through, it would have lots of cross ventilation, lots of windows. They only malted in the cool months. So it only went they'd start in September and stop in April, and lots of cross ventilation. And then once germination was done, it would drop down into the kiln, dry the grain down, build some color, and then they would package it off as finished malt in yet another floor below that. And so they built up. And so that's how the old malt houses look. Once we had, motorized augers and blowers and all kinds of things, malting took on a very different turn. They built something called a Saladin box, wherein all the augers were in a row and the grain was much, much deeper, like a meter deep. And they blew air from underneath in addition to turning it. So lots of different technologies came about with the Industrial Revolution, and batch sizes got bigger, malt houses got larger and more efficient. And I guess that's sort of the history of malting in 3 minutes.
No, it's great. What do you, because you have that picture, do you still do some floor malting too?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
What kind of percentage is that versus pneumatic?
It's about 10% of our product line right now. We've got several customers that, they've got a dedicated beer or spirit that this is part of the personality of that product. And people will we typically will use that. We'll also use floor malting as our R&D process. So if we've got a new variety of barley or wheat to test out, or we want to, get a feel for a different kilning recipe, we'll start at that 2-ton scale and make small mistakes first and then scale it up into the 10-ton system.
It's like a small batch system, like a brewery might have,
Absolutely.
right? They can still make some small stuff and kind of put in the tap room or screw up if you want to, but before you mass produce it.
Yeah. It's and it's definitely been helpful. Like I say, we've got customers that want to explore in that space and build a custom malt, and we can use that 2-ton malt system for those types of projects as well. We were talking about water chemistry earlier. We've actually done a couple of batches where we're actually tinkering with the water chemistry of the steep water to mimic a Belgian malt house's water profile as a way of sort of seeing if that affects flavor, germination rates, etc. So we're able to really play around and do some fun stuff with the 2-ton.
A lot of science that goes involved in this, isn't there?
It is. And that's really the fun part for us, is it truly is one of those art and science things, because, each year over year, just like wine grapes have differences in their crop year, barley does too, not as pronounced, but like crop A from 2024 might require a little bit more time in the steep cycle than the crop from 2025. And we don't always have a great answer for why that's the case, but it just is. And so we know that, hey, look at this. Avalon from this year's harvest or this farmer's lot needs 2 or 3 more hours in the steep cycle to get the same target moisture as it did last year. Make a note of that and put that into the recipe going forward.
Hey, on your website, as I said earlier, your website is fantastic, riverbendmalt.com. I'm looking at the section where it has like standard malts and talking about shop by a type of grain. Can you go through a lot of that? Because it's very fascinating, and I would imagine for, brewers, they have to love this page, because you have so many different things on there, that different styles for different beers. Can you go through a little bit about that?
For sure. Yeah. So, we kind of, what we're basically trying to do is walk people through, the flavor profiles of each of the main products. Most of what we sell, no surprise, are barley-based products, but we spend just as much time, educating folks about the heirloom rye that goes into our Carolina rye product. We want them to know, like, hey, this packs a little bit more punch than the standard, mass-produced stuff that you might have come into contact with. Here's a flavor wheel that introduces you to some of the main, top line flavors that we're picking up. Here's kind of a basic spec sheet, and here are some styles that we think this will work well in. And then when it comes to base malts, we're just kind of trying to help people make connections with certain flavor profiles, and then also like where some of these products will fit in and replace products that they're more comfortable using, let's say. So like if you're a home brewer that specializes in, British or English special bitter, extra special bitters, what am I going to do? I don't see a British pale ale on this. Well, we have a product called Southern Select, and that's kilned darker than our traditional base camp, which is our sort of workhorse base malt. And the discussion points in that webpage about Southern Select kind of clearly define, like, hey, if you're building a pub ale, this is your base malt to start with. But yeah, you're exactly right. There's because people are coming to this website with from a lot of different backgrounds, and
I would think
we try to help people find their way from a lot of different pathways in and help them build recipes. Because we really, it sounds kind of crazy, but sometimes we actually will lead off with customers by saying, please don't put this malt in your flagship beer, because your flagship beer is your flagship beer. And maybe this will it's going to make it different. Might be better different, but it's going to be different. And so we kind of like to walk people in with, here's the flavors that we picked up. We suggest you do the same. We'll do the hot steep with them. I don't know if y'all have had a chance to do that, but it's basically making malt tea that's the same concentration that a brewer will create in the brew house. And we'll build some teas, sometimes even doing complete recipes in this way, so that people can get a feel for the mouthfeel, aromatic profile, all these things, so that we kind of want them to build a recipe from the flavors that they perceive. My opinion is just that, my opinion. So
Yeah.
we kind of want to get the wheels turning, and then have them say, oh, yeah, no, I get that flavor note, Brent, but I'm over here. I want to do a dunkel with this, not what you were thinking about. And so that's really why we lay out all of this information on the website, is like, if you can't have the one-on-one with us, we hope there's enough sort of breadcrumbs there for you to find your way to a new recipe that's of interest to you.
And how often have you heard back from folks that have used these where they're like, what kind of success stories do you have from folks that you've been able to help?
A lot of them, we've had a lot of fun. We're always looking for like the what's next in the beer trends and whatnot, so like when hazy IPA blew up, I was like, we don't have any oats. What are we going to do? And so we started with a naked oat that we called streaker oat, so no hull on it, and had this beautiful almond character, and people were really excited. We got some good feedback. But the one thing we heard was lautering was kind of a pain. And so we were like, okay, well, we also have hulled oats, traditional oats. And everyone was like, they used those and they were like, oh my God, this is perfect. We get the mouthfeel of oats and we get beautiful lautering. And I was like, and I was talking with a friend of mine, Jen from Wicked Weed. And she said, well, so of course you're going to call the product Hull and Oats. And I was like, well, and now, like, because that's fantastic. So we had some fun with oats during the hazy IPA run up. And then as lagers came to the forefront, we really took this opportunity to kind of try to deliver as much diversity in the Pilsner malt space as possible. Again, kind of back to the varietal and back to the farm aspect. We really spent a lot of time zeroing in on, what does variety A versus variety B taste like in its unblended, unadorned format. Very low color malt, not a lot of tricks in the malt house, just straight ahead. So what we started with was Chesapeake Pilsner. It's all Violetta barley, and you get nice sort of floral, grassy, sort of dry, crispy profile out of this malt. And that's perfect for German Pilsner. And we had another variety called Calypso, and now a new one called Avalon. It's more bready, rounded, sort of melony kind of character to it. And we're like, that'll be great in a Helles. And, so having some folks, come back to us and they're like, yes, that German Pilsner was absolutely fantastic. Like, y'all killed it. And I was able to, displace one of the big sort of international stars of malt, Wireman, in a few occasions, like where people were like, this malt was good enough. I'm putting local malt in place of a classic German malt for a German beer style. And
that's fantastic.
Anytime you get that kind of a phone call, that's a good day.
Yes.
We have said on here in the last 4 or 5 years, and it may be a combination of things, of our appreciation more of lagers and pilsners in the craft beer, but I think they've gotten better. And I was given 100% credit to the brewers. Hey man, you guys are making great lager beers and they're fantastic. And then we start researching you, and I'm like, wait a minute, it starts with you guys.
That's right.
It's definitely it's definitely a partnership, no doubt. Again, we want to sort of lay out a buffet of options for brewers to build lager recipes with. The most recent step we took was, as Czech lager started to bubble up as sort of the latest sort of subgenre for people to explore. Yeah, and again, this is going to get a little geeky, but let me roll for a minute. And
go ahead.
So if you look at a modern Pilsner malt, it's pretty much what we would consider fully modified, meaning brewer or maltsters pushed it as far as it can go to maximize sugar delivery in the brew house. So most beer for your buck, basically. And that's great. kiln nice and light. So we still have that piece of the story in place. Light colored, crispy Pilsner, but maximum extract. So when we looked at the certificate of analysis for Czech Pilsners still coming out of that part of the world, we said, wow, look at this grain. This is really under modified material. Like this could be a real disaster if we handed this to a brewer and they didn't know what they were doing, because they basically have to step mash or decoct this material to get to sort of finish out that conversion step of the process. And we said, well, most of our customers do not have the equipment to step and decoct, but but there's also a flavor change that happens. The less modification you allow to happen in the malt house, you really keep that sweetness component at bay. And so we said, well, what would that look like if we sort of took a few steps in that direction to make a crispier, drier, under modified Pilsner? How would we do that? Well, we starve it with moisture, and then we would keep germination shorter and cooler to sort of tamp down all that germination energy. And so we kind of took those steps and said, okay, here you go. This is going to be a little bit more complicated to the work in the brew house. You might need a little bit more conversion time. If you want to step or decoct, you can, but here you go. And we had a brewery, a group called Rock Solid in Georgia, win a medal with the Czech Pilsner and another one of our products, Double Kiln Munich, in the Czech Dark Lager category. And that was pretty special. Again, anytime you put local malt into an international category and take home some hardware, that's an awesome day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. I think about this. Scott and I were out at a couple of breweries over the weekend, and I think about some of the beers we were drinking, whether they were lagers and Czech lagers and things like that. And then I think, you know what? Also, what about like pumpkin beers? And then we've been into the style lately. Every once in a while, we'll try them where it's like a peanut butter and what was it? The blackberry.
Oh yeah,
blackberry.
Marble Fox.
Marble Fox that we had. And so,
interesting.
As those kinds of things have evolved, we know it's not maybe the typical brew that you're going to see at every brewery across the United States, but you see it popping up. How do you guys keep up with those sort of trends?
I have a great answer for the heavy adjunct stouts and all of that. All I would say is that we would make something that sort of plays nicely with those flavors, kind of give a brewer a solid base to jump off from. Typically when they're putting that level of adjuncts in, anything I'm doing in the malt house is going to get washed away.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you said y'all were at GABF. Did you get by Cohesion?
No, I didn't get to Cohesion.
Next time you're in that area, I was thinking Czech lager specialists. And
are they in the Denver area or just one of the outlying towns, cities?
Yeah, they're in Denver.
Okay.
They are big fans of craft malt as well. They work with a group in that area called Troubadour. It's that same sort of lovely relationship of these malts make these types of flavors, and it's sort of traditional Czech process with local malt mixed into it. So they've got a neat story going on there.
Oh, that's cool. I just wrote them down because we're always looking for new. Not that the Denver area needs there's so many places, but we're always looking for places with recommendations when we get out that way because there's just so many,
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're great.
Hey, before we go any further, we're all drinking beer. At least I think Steve is. I don't know if I saw you drinking one yet.
Yeah.
And Brent, what are you drinking? And I want to ask, do you have Riverbend Malt House in that beer?
I actually don't, but there's a chill in the air right now here in Asheville, and I have an Ondex Doppelbock in the refrigerator. And this is an absolute banger of a Doppelbock, classic style. They just nail it. And it's, I don't even know what malt they use in it, but it is just a beautiful beer. And
it's that time of year, like you said,
it's that time of year. We need something with a little bit of heft to it. And I always forget. They've been making beer since 1455.
Wow. You think they know what they're doing yet?
I think they figured a few things out. It's pretty special.
God.
Man, I have got this Zool. There you go, right here.
Oh yeah. Speaking of
Yeah.
adjuncts, actually
Yeah.
that's probably just a double IPA, right?
Yeah, this is their double IPA. It's got Citra and peach tangerine in it. This thing is pretty good, man.
Nice. Yeah, Zool's making some big waves in Tennessee. They've
Yeah.
They are.
making some
They're in our backyard or about to be.
acquisitions. Right on. Okay, are y'all based in Nashville?
Nashville, yeah.
Right on. Cool. Yeah, I heard Marble Fox. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Marble Fox is great. And then some Zool's thing is they're taking over the two Southern Grist locations that are
Oh.
here. So that's
Yeah.
we love Southern Grist, but it's exciting also at the same time.
For
Zool
sure.
coming to town.
Yeah,
We'll
definitely.
see how that shakes out. But I've got one, and it's Steve. You know about these Stokehouse,
Oh, yes.
and they're new. It's their
Yep.
West Coast IPA, and these guys were at Tenfold prior. Brent, if
Oh,
you
yeah.
knew Tenfold, and the cool, and I wish I'd had when I thought I bought it the other day, but I didn't. Stokehouse, I believe, is a customer of yours.
Yep, for sure.
They buy your
Yep.
for their signature beer, I believe,
Yes.
which is their dark English ale. I think because he told us when we were talking to them recently, he brought your name up specifically, the Riverbend Malt House.
Yeah. Great folks there. So excited to see them kind of jump out and do their own thing. It's Nashville's got a beautiful beer scene. We do a bunch of stuff with Stokehouse, Tenfold, Harding House, and Tennessee Beer Works, Brew Works. Yeah, so we've got great representation in the center of the state.
Yep.
Which makes total sense because one of our major farmers is located just about an hour north of Nashville, right near the Tennessee-Kentucky line, and we get a tremendous amount of material from them. So that's kind of Tennessee's breadbasket right there, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
That area of the state, and then also in between Nashville and Chattanooga, has some good barley growing areas as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before Chad mentioned this one, we actually heard about you from two other breweries that we've had on this podcast. Actually,
Okay.
both of them twice. Eric Latham, who is Johnson City Brewing.
For sure. Yeah, he's
He
great.
brought you guys up one time, and then Anthony Davis from East Nashville Beer Works brought you guys up. You guys, I think you provide one for his Tennessee Pills.
Yep.
There's a Tennessee Pills thing that you do. So your name has come up multiple times prior to today.
Yeah. We've done good work in Tennessee. It's it's followed our general playbook is go out, get a grower or two from that state that grows good barley, work with the material, and then go back and visit the brewers and distillers and say, here, we've got XYZ products developed with material from your state. You can isolate it. We had great success with, we had a Cumberland Pilsner that was made with 100% barley from Tennessee, and then we also have a malted corn from Tennessee. So we had tons of folks making beautiful American lagers with those two ingredients. So people got a lot of traction at market with it's 100% Tennessee grain now.
Yeah. Brent, I tell you, when Scott had told me about you guys and we were going to get you on here, and when I started doing a lot of research, one of the things that really I wanted to hear about was when you all started this up around 2011, I believe.
Yep.
Can you really recall when you started talking the first farmers and breweries and others about trying to bring everybody together? I mean, how did those conversations start?
Yeah. So the early ones, I can't say enough wonderful things about North Carolina and Virginia's ag extension programs. They did exactly what they were designed to do, which is connect a market with the growers that make those products. And so we started very early on talking with the small grain specialists at North Carolina or NC State's ag extension program. They connected us with some barley growers early on. We did some test trial stuff, even working with the researchers who are doing, small scale variety trials that are, 1/10 of an acre plots or smaller. They sent us home after a couple of meetings with, burlap bags full of stuff from these trials. And so humble beginnings, my co-founder, Brian Simpson, so I was the home brewer. So I had all the homebrew gear at my house, and Brian had all our early malting gear in his place. And that consisted of a galvanized metal tub from a farm supply shop and a meat smoker with a bathroom fan duct taped to it from so humble beginnings, 10-pound batches, enough to do a 5-gallon homebrew run. And we started with 6-row barley, which, me being the home brewer, I had read Charlie Papazian's book, of course. And, he has this disparaging paragraph in there about 6-row barley is only for the land of micro loggers and macro loggers and, adjunct stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, Brian, 6-row barley may not have a place. And we took a shot at it and it made great beer right out of the first couple of tries. I was like, okay, I'm in, let's do this, and we also met a gentleman, Rick Wasman, out of Sperryville, Virginia, Copper Fox Distilling. He was malting his own barley, the thoroughbred 6-row that we started with. He was making award-winning American single malt 15 years ago, if you can believe that. And so all of these things, all of these aha moments and light bulb moments kind of came together. And, one of our earliest customers, Full Steam Brewing out of Durham, I had met the owner of that brewery, Sean Wilson. We were working together on a campaign called Pop the Cap in North Carolina to get rid of our 6% alcohol law, which of course kept craft beer, completely, pinned down in terms of creativity. So Sean was one of the first people I approached. He was up here in Asheville doing an event, and I bellied up to the bar beside him at Thirsty Monk. And I was like, Sean, I could make local malt using North Carolina grown barley. Would you buy it? And he was like, yeah, I would, Brent. And I was like, okay. Well, here's our first customer, so let's keep going. So somehow or another, that move made me Riverbend salesman from the word go. But anyway, we all got started that way. And like I say, started with a 1-ton malt house in 2010, 2011, went to a 10-ton facility in 2014, and then took the big leap and went into a 70,000 square foot facility with room to grow in 2018. So
Brent,
50,000 first year, 5 million this year.
Yeah.
it's fantastic. Do you think those early days was because, not that selling it was easy, but because you were getting locally sourced stuff or selling it locally was a big selling point?
Yeah. It really, in some cases, it was, we were learning our craft. So at some point, people would call and be like, hey, Brent, I want to do some malt. I want to make a beer. And I'd be like, well, I'm going to be honest with you. The batch we just finished is not what we expected. I think it's this color and it has these flavors to it. And they're like, well, just send it on. We'll make something out of it. And I'm like, well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
But, flash forward a decade or more later, consistency is key. And if we want to be a part of, year-round IPAs and lagers, we got to deliver the same stuff week in and week out. And so
Sure.
that's probably been the greatest challenge. And, kudos to our growers for growing with us, is that, over the years, they've gotten better, we've gotten better, and that's the key to consistency.
Your customers have needs, right? You've talked about them. We're going to talk about some more about them too. You have needs from your growers, right? How do those conversations go? You're like, hey, I kind of need a little bit more of this, or can you talk to a grower and say, hey, can you refine this in a certain way or anything like that? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So the conversation, I'll back up and say the good thing about talking with growers in the Southeast is we are talking about winter barley. So it goes in the ground right about now, mid-October, and is harvested in June. So that keeps us out of the way of the main cash crops of the South, corn, soybeans, etc. So that's an easy entree right there. So we're basically saying, hey, while your fields aren't doing a whole lot, could you plant something that will pay you for? Okay, cool. So I've got their attention. But we are kind of a pain. We want specific barley varietals. We want specific specs regarding germination, fungal growth limitations. We use a term called test weight as kind of an easy catch-all. So a healthy, high-quality batch of barley should have at least 48 pounds per bushel test weight. Fantastic quality barley will have like 50 or 52 pound test weight. So we kind of set a floor on test weight. Now, if we were selling into the feed market, no one cares about these things. It's going into animal feed. No one cares. So we offer a premium price because we're asking for a premium grain. And so we kind of lay out all of these things and we say, we need it cleaned. We need it in tote bags. And oh yeah, I also can't take all of it as soon as you harvest it, which is the other thing that is problematic. So our target growers will kind of have a dedicated Riverbend bin on site. That's their barley. They order it, a couple truckloads at a time over the course of a year. And, it's on them to keep the bugs at bay and keep the moisture levels at where we need them. So we're definitely kind of a pain. But by putting all that out in front of everybody from the get-go, everybody knows where we stand and what everyone's expectations are. And so we just kind of lay it out clearly from the start. I want Avalon barley at this level of protein, this level of moisture, this level of germination. And I'm going to take it, 50 to 100,000 pounds at a time over this coming year. Is that okay? And they say, yes, this is the price I need. And we say, okay, fair enough. Let's do this,
It's a win-win.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about that too, is we pull our customers out of the global market for small grain. So we're not talking about, logging into the Chicago Board of Trade and looking at futures contracts and all of that business. It's a handshake agreement on the back of a pickup truck, is really how we like to do business. And so pulling everybody out of that, they know exactly what they're going to get. We know exactly what we're going to get. That keeps our prices from fluctuating, regardless of what geopolitical things are going on, what kind of climatic issues are going on. You guys may remember a couple of years back, there was a freak rain event out in the Western US near harvest time. They got like an unexpected inch or two of rain and all the barley started sprouting in the head, basically starting to malt itself essentially. And, markets went crazy. Everyone was completely, everyone was freaking out because the malt quality was inevitably going to be impacted. And everyone kept calling me and they're like, what's going on? And I'm like, what do you mean what's going on? Our barley was harvested 3-4 months ago. We're fine. It's in the bin.
Oh, yeah.
It's winter barley. Everything that grows out west is spring barley. And so, we find that we have to continually message these kinds of key differentiating factors to everyone, basically, that, by having this smaller supply chain, there's a whole host of benefits that everyone in the brewing and distilling world can take advantage of.
It's amazing. It's a buffer. You've got this buffer built in. For both sides, it's amazing. And it's, and people don't panic. Now you're like, I got you.
We haven't, knock on wood, we haven't had a panic yet. And, the other thing too, is we space out our growers across the Southeast. So we're taking advantage of those microclimates. So we have growers in coastal Virginia, central Tennessee. We have, and sort of in the Piedmont portion of North Carolina. And so, if there's an early tropical storm or a late freeze or whatever, we've got options going into harvest that have pretty well served us. And we haven't had any shortages yet.
But how cool is it? But how cool is it though that, we know farmers struggle. That's a tough business. That's a tough life. But you guys, you said you're a pain at times, but I'm sure they appreciate it because you're really helping, I would imagine, a lot of farmers out there.
Yeah. We try to be a good partner and, we're always looking for farmers that are what we call students of the game. The guys that show up at the ag extension events where they're demoing a new, approach to adding fertilizer or, different techniques for planting or herbicide treatment or whatever, the folks that are, basically attending the equivalent of a continuing education kind of thing. Like, those are the folks that are going to have the highest degree of success when it comes to getting good barley out of the field, which supports us making good malt, which supports brewers making great beer.
Brent, in going into this, I assumed beer, right? All the malt goes to beer, but that does not, does it?
No. So
You guys, looking on your website, as Steve referenced earlier, the great, fantastic website that you have,
Fantastic website.
you have some whiskey connections too, and actually one that's in Tennessee. If you want to talk about that, Chattanooga whiskey, I saw on your website.
Yeah. So we find ourselves to be kind of a secret sauce for a lot of distilleries. If you look at bourbon in its most clear, unadulterated form, you're talking about a recipe that's mostly corn, more than 51 by law, typically more like 70 to 80. And then you'll have, a portion of either raw wheat or raw rye, and then anywhere from 5 to 15% malted barley that's being called upon to do some pretty heavy lifting in terms of converting all the starch in that corn into something that can be utilized by yeast. So it's kind of a different animal. Most distillers are looking for higher enzyme products, but in the case of sort of modern craft whiskey, most folks are tamping down that corn and bringing up the malted percentages. That also helps support better conversion, or easier conversion, I should say. But probably more importantly, brings in a lot of interesting flavors. So when you sort of make the decision to swap out some of that corn for like a dark Munich or a crystal malt or a Munich rye or something like that, you're bringing in some really, really bold flavors into the mash that are much more pronounced than a raw wheat or a raw rye can deliver. Because most of the time, a distiller's malt, if driven just for enzyme production, is going to be kind of bland on the flavor profile. Maltsters don't have the ability to kiln at very warm temperatures to develop a lot of complex flavors, because those higher temperatures will knock down the enzyme levels. So when we say, oh, we've got more malt to work with, we want more flavor, all sorts of doors open up. So we can do a four grain bourbon. It's still bourbon by law, but has a whole host of new, more exciting flavors than kind of your standard everyday stuff.
Have you heard of, so we've talked beer, we've talked whiskey. Have you heard of any unique or any other, say, facets or industries that use malt that maybe you weren't expecting, whether it's drink or food products or anything like that?
There's some bizarre things out there. One thing we're looking at is the food industry is looking to step further and further away from artificial colors. And so specialty malt can deliver that color and some pretty similar flavor profiles and in more natural origin. So that's one thing we're exploring, but we're always keeping our eye out. We have a partnership with a chocolate, French broad chocolates here in Asheville. They use our dark Munich in one of their special releases. And so there's tons of fun stuff like that going on.
Yeah.
Real quick, the place, and I just imagine everywhere you walk in your facility, whether it's the offices or the warehouse or whatever, everything smells good. I think it's got to smell good, right? You got a smokehouse over here. You're smoking things. It's like, I just imagine.
It does. Most days, Brian and I have both tuned our olfactory senses, so we can open the front door and be like, okay, what's wrong? So something smells off, and we'll walk over and we'll check with the guys running the production, and they'll be like, oh yeah, the kiln cut off on batch number 2 in the middle of the night, and we're having to catch up, and it's like, okay, all right. And then we run several different smoked products, and so that's always fun too, to open the door in the morning and you get that waft of like pecan wood coming through, and you're like, oh yeah. We're working on that recipe, working on that order for, XYZ distillery. And so, yeah, the flavors are good. And our relatively new neighbor, Poppy Popcorn in town.
Oh boy.
So they're making artisanal popcorn in the sweet over. And so we get their like caramel popcorn flavors coming through our offices. So it's, Smells pretty good in there.
Not a bad combination. Maybe you guys could do some kind of collab somewhere down the road.
Right.
We're trying. They've been so busy. They got a deal with the Buc-ee's. Yeah, so they got the Buc-ee's chain deal, and they have had their heads down ever since that.
Yeah, I live in an area, I live south of Nashville where they just broke ground for a Buc-ee's. I think it's going to open in about a year or so. It's going to be crazy. Brent, I'm curious, you co-founded the company in 2011. How has your role in what you do evolved and really kind of changed from when you first started till now?
Yeah, no, great questions. When it started, and for many, many years, Brian and I we were shoveling grain. And so I don't think I was taken out of production duties until 2018 or 19.
Okay.
So, we were both standard entrepreneurs, wore all the hats. I would come home from a day of shoveling grain, and I would send out invoices from my sofa at night, and then get back up and do it again, And I think now my current title is Chief Strategy Officer. And so that kind of puts me in the role of, I always say, it's like listening for the first hooves of the buffalo. You want to get the front end of that herd. And so I'm always in charge of like, what is the industry doing next? What is happening? And so I think that's probably the biggest shift is going away from production. And the only thing I'm involved with in production right now is QA/QC. So I still taste every batch via hot steep that leaves the malt house. So, but I'm not shoveling anymore. I've held roles as, sales director, all sorts of stuff. Again, wearing all the hats. The one thing I was very happy to get is when they looked at me and they said, Brent, we don't want you to ever touch QuickBooks again. And I said, fair enough. That's great. I wasn't good at it anyway. You can have it. So we've had, several talented accountants come in and drive that for us, and I'm thankful for them. So yeah, it's been a hell of a ride, but I still spend a lot of time with our customers. Technical sales and recipe development is still something I really get into. I wish I could tell you I knew I had a feel for where the industry is going next. I don't. For the first time, I think I've gone a full 12 months without I think this style is going to pop next. It's like, I'm not seeing that. If anything, the style funnel is getting a little bit more narrow. Everything's yellow, I feel like, and everything's
very much so 5 to 7 ABV. And, that's why I'm so thankful to have a beautiful Doppelbock to drink. Cause
yeah. Well, I started joking before, you see some of these different beer styles that come along, and we joked about, Scott and I did, about the PB&J beers that have become like a big deal with breweries around here. And I don't know, we're parts of the country, if it's everywhere or not, but I don't even know if there's even feasibility for you guys if somebody contacts you and say, hey, by the way, because you're like, we don't know. I mean, that may be a fad that lasts 2 or 3 months. So
right. Yeah. All I can say is throughout all these fads, we thought a lot of them were going to take us out. When seltzer came on, cider came on, and you look at their growth curves and we're like, all right, well, that's it. Everyone's going to drink cider now. And then you watch their data fall off a cliff. And now the thing that we're watching is THC drinks. Those things are going, I don't know what Tennessee's approach is to them, but the Carolinas are starting to kind of mainstream them. And meaning they're in grocery stores instead of just head shops. And that's interesting. But, again, experience teaches wisdom. And I'm less concerned now. It's like, I know they're going to have their pop and they're going to just have a real tangible impact on beer sales for, 3 to 6 months, maybe a year. And then people are going to be like, all right, been there, done that. THC drinks make me sleepy. Next,
Yeah. Well, and Scott referenced this earlier, and I know he kind of asked you about this. That's, we've been doing the podcast for about 2 years, and it's something that I would say, Scott, when you say over the past year or so, we, when we have talked to brewers, and we personally have experienced that, lagers have really become a big deal again. And
drinking another one. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But don't you think though, Brent, that helps you because you're going, look, things are coming full circle again, right?
Yeah. No, I'm so excited for this. I mean, and I give full faith and credit to brewers who just absolutely willed this trend into existence. I mean,
Yeah.
We've been wishing and hoping and cheerleading the year of the lager since probably 2018 or 19. And I think 23, 24, and now we're there. Everybody is, I would venture most breweries are measured just as much by their IPA as their lager portfolio now. And
sure,
I think that's a beautiful thing. And yes, it absolutely helps us. It helps craft malt. It's a beautiful entree into what else is in this beer that I'm tasting. It's the yeast by design is kind of taking a backseat. The hops are restrained. They're serving a much more straightforward purpose of kind of just cleaning up your palate. And it's really the brewer's technique, water chemistry choices, and malt character that are driving these. And we're excited. We're here for it. And we're trying to just keep products in front of the brewers that they find interesting and, politely elbow our way into the brew house, into styles that were previously only the domain of German ingredients.
I think these traditional beers that we're just talking about, I think it's what's going to save, when I say craft beer, maybe even make it grow, because we're kind of flat, the last couple of years, ultimately,
Sure.
At least with breweries opening and closing.
Yeah.
That might be the thing that saves it. And it might even be a thing where those that aren't making it will, and they got to make them well, because like you said, you can't hide behind anything. It's got to be good. But also maybe it brings back some old world styles that haven't been produced, at least not produced in this country, still along those lines.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Things like that. It's like, hey, we discovered that these are good. Let's discover a few other things along the same lines. Are still pure and traditional. And
right. And they're not so strong that you can't hang out and have a couple. And
yeah,
I think that's a big piece of it, is kind of restoring that third place. It's like, is there a spot I can go that's truly a part of this community? And can I bring my family or my buddies or whatever, and we hang out? We see a lot of people winning in this. I mean, some of the headlines sound horrible. Like we should all just pack up our stuff and go home, but the word on the street is much different. I mean, if you're bringing great beer, a well thought out atmosphere, well-trained staff, some events, some interesting food, like that's a recipe for success. We see it time and again. I mean, there's definitely people kicking cans out there that are not, for whatever reason, are not able to succeed, but there's plenty of other success stories. I actually wanted to start a podcast this year that was just sharing those success stories, because I was so tired of hearing, if it bleeds, it leads kind of to beer media. And, time got away from us. But I definitely think it's a story that needs to be told. There's tons of success stories throughout the Southeast and throughout the larger craft beer market. So we're here for it. I mean, we're one of 70 craft malt houses around the nation that are, ready to support a variety of lager styles that are leaning into malt and barley varieties that grow in a much more regional approach. I mean, are we at wine terroir? No, we're not there yet.
Right.
So many beer journalists I talk to are like, please tell me we're ready, with that you can tell the difference between, the same batch of barley grown in one field to the other. And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm sorry. But I can tell you the difference in the barley varieties, and I can tell you in the malt house, but that's it, but that's enough. I mean, if we can tell the difference in the same German style lager made it from a Southeastern brewery to a Northeastern brewery, then that's interesting. I mean, that's a cool story to tell.
Well, and the other thing is, Scott mentioned a few minutes ago about East Nashville Beer Works, and we did a podcast with them recently with their owner, Anthony Davis, and one of the things we brought up was, they're seeing it. I mean, they know that Michelob Ultra is now, the best selling beer in America, right? But they're making other like East Nashville Beer Works, for example, they're making other beers that are almost similar to that, but thank God, they're better. And I think Scott could say the same thing. I mean, he goes out and drinks beer. I go out and drink beer. Sometimes we go out and drink better, drink the beer together, and we see it and we're like, oh man, taste that lager? Scott, did you get that lager? Did you get that Pilsner?
The light lager, like you just said, like the East
Yeah.
Nashville one's like, it's a light lager too. You're like, this is actually good. Like Nashville Brewing has a really good light lager. I think they won a gold medal or medal at GABF a year or two ago.
The key is it's not just watered down.
That is the trick, and that's a skill unto itself. I mean, will we see, the British mild come in and fill a similar space? I don't know. Probably not, because people are just scared of dark beer still. And so,
Yeah.
But yes, I think there's a lot of ground to be covered. I think the only thing that's challenging for craft breweries on the light lager front is the price point issue. If you sit down and they charge you $7 a pint, that's a tough sell.
When the guys used to buying a 24 pack for $9.
Right. Exactly. So I think that piece is still to be determined. I think it's, like Bart Watson from the BA said, it's like the $7 a pint price point is a tipping point for the consumer. And
sure,
I think that's most acute at that 4% light lager style, because everyone immediately says, I can buy X amount of X beer. I mean, Coors Banquet or whatever, you immediately go to that comparison. And I think that's kind of a dangerous play for a craft brewer to get into. I'd want to make sure the rest of my I'd probably err of reducing that beer's price and add a quarter to everything else on the top wall. And
that's a really good strategy.
People recognize that, oh yeah, okay, well they did debit that down based on the ABV, and okay, that feels right.
Sure.
Good point. Yeah.
It's an excellent point. I hadn't heard that or thought about that before. That actually is actually perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that could be your loss leader into
exactly. Well, we always think about it as, what's the price point that's going to stop you from that third beer? Is it $7?
Yep.
Is it $7.50? Like what's going to stop you from hanging out? And and that's the price. And that's what every craft brewer should think about when they plan their menu out, is like,
sure,
is this guy or gal done at 2 beers because now they've spent $20 after a tip?
Right.
So, and because then we get into whole volumetric, issues of like, if I sell 3 beers at $6 versus 2 at $7.50, did I win? I don't know, and that's going to be different for every brew house and every tap room environment. Now we've
on your website
off topic.
That's okay, but it's all
good.
connected.
We're
It's
good.
all connected. It's all we care about. On your website, you've got some partners listed, industry partners and university partnerships. And I love this because we've had, and they're actually on this list, Appalachian State University Fermentation Science Program has been on this podcast.
Yep.
Dr. Taubman's been on here, and they are one of your partners. Talk about them specifically and or the universities in general. What is that partnership like? And is it really just kind of is same kind of thing that you're doing with brewers, or is it a little bit different because they're universities?
It takes a lot of different forms. So like typically, it's about putting a little bit more of a face and a name and an experience around malt. If you're a student in a brewing class or program, and I always kind of pick on it because malt kind of gets short shrift, it's like, oh yeah, malt, here we go. It's 2 days out of your whole curriculum, and it's like, but if the students visit the malt house, they go through the different steps of the process in real time, taste the grain at each step, see it, then do the hot steep with me and all of that. It's like, it's a deeper imprint in terms of like what the role that malt plays in recipe development, because inevitably that, like a class from ASU will come visit, do the tour, and then I will send them home with different products, and their next brew day is a mix of recipes from all of our products, and everyone's like, holy crap, I've homebrewed before, but I'm getting this different note from Riverbend's Dark Munich versus Wireman's, or this Pilsner absolutely outshines something from the big boys here in North America, and light bulbs go off. And so I think that's where we really like that academic connection, is that it's the old adage, home brewers become pro brewers, right? So we're catching them in that development stage. And then sort of from a true academic standpoint, we have some really interesting partnerships with folks like the University of Kentucky, where we're actually test malting material that they've grown under different growing conditions to see, is their terroir? Does that difference in fertility management actually translate into different specs? Or, a better barley, a higher test weight, a better performing malt, So it really runs the gamut from early intervention, let's call it, with an aspiring brewer, to a seasoned academic with a PhD who has a totally different set of goals.
That's so cool. Like, thinking back on that episode, I don't know. I just feel like, just putting it all together, right? If I was early in my fermentation career, if I'm at the University of App State or wherever, or App State University, I would want to know about these things. It might be one of those things you don't think about on the front end, or like, oh, I can take this with me in my career later on. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and it, typically most of these students are younger, right? And so they have a broader suite of concerns. It's not just like, hey, teach me how to make beer. That's cool. But yeah, hey, well, I also have some environmental things that I'd like to uphold. And well, so this checks that box too. This malt was made with barley that's grown 100 miles away instead of 3,000. So that's a win. And so we kind of have that stage, if you will, to sort of talk about all the things that make local malt valuable. It's not just the flavor and freshness, but we've got some environmental benefits. We've got some local economy benefits. A whole host of things that can kind of resonate with a lot of different consumers.
See, I would think in that instance, again, as a student going into any of those programs, my thought would probably be, hey, I'm going to go in, I'm going to be a brewer, right? I want to brew beers. And then you realize there's other aspects, like Stephen Moxley, I think, went on to like a yeast company.
Yeah.
Like all these other avenues you might not even have thought about as far as a career goes later on, when you graduate 4 years later.
Yeah, sure.
And malt being one of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, early on, we had a lot of environmental science majors and agroecology type folks coming through to work at the Malt House, because again, we represented that perfect intersection of, something that had mass appeal, but also had an environmental ethos behind it. And that really resonates with the younger generation. I mean, I'm full gray hair now and almost 50. So I wouldn't say I'm part of that generation anymore, but, still, that's really one of the tenets that Brian and I laid out is, when we looked at companies like New Belgium and Patagonia, like, we wanted a company that had that sort of durable environmental ethos behind it. And we've been able to stick to it. And we're pretty proud of that.
Will you continue on that pace and talk about sustainability? You guys have a big section on your website that we keep referring to because it's so awesome.
Yeah.
By the way, and I know there's a million angles of sustainability, but please talk about kind of your angle.
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, just to kind of frame things up, malt is a global commodity. Malt is primarily produced in Western US, Western and Central Canada, Western Europe, Australia. And so it's a global commodity. It literally moves all over the planet with trains, planes, automobiles, boats, you name it. It moves around. The Southeast was typically not seen as a barley growing region, still isn't. If you look at the USDA's barley production maps, we're not on it. We're a rounding error. We're dust compared to the bigger producers. And so we're in Asheville. The closest major malt house to where we are is Chilton, Wisconsin. That's Breese. Breese buys their barley from the Bighorn Valley in Wyoming, which grows exquisite barley. No shade in that at all. The trip from the farm to the fermenter is a couple thousand miles. As I said, we're at max 400 to 500. Most of our stuff is coming from 300 or less. So from a strictly food mile perspective, we've got a win there. And obviously the people over in Europe have thousands of 8,000 miles, I think, is the distance from Wireman to Asheville. So we've got some basic food mile stuff there that is a win. More recently, we started as an organic, and Mother Nature quickly showed us that was too aggressive and that we needed to step back and stay conventional to just get a decent crop of barley in the door. But one of the most exciting things that we've been able to jump back into is regenerative agriculture. So we're the first Regenified certified malt house on the planet. And what that basically means is we are able to preserve that transparency and traceability of a given lot of barley from a regenerative farm all the way through to the brewery. So back to our friends at Full Steam in Durham, they're the first certified brewery. So we're now closing that loop from a regenerative certified farm in Maryland. Their barley comes to us in Asheville, and then the malt goes to Durham to make beer. So regenerative agriculture includes things like no-till farming, which reduces erosion. We've got cover cropping, which also reduces erosion, but also preserves nutrients and carbon in the soil. All these different things improve the soil health and actually build structure within the soil that retains carbon. And Regenified is really, really special in the sense that they visit their farms every year and do an entire battery of tests that actually documents the carbon sequestration that takes place in these farms. It documents the increase in biological activity in the soil and the surrounding areas. All these beautiful things are happening. So we're really proud of that Regenified certification as a way of sort of staying ahead of a lot of the marketing and what we consider greenwashing around agriculture. By documenting farms that take these practices to heart, we're seeing environmental benefits and seeing brewers and distillers get excited about this and really fold this into their marketing efforts and environmental management plans as well.
Amazing. And I know we're running long, and we want to let you go.
No, you're good. You're good.
A million other. You're doing good. Okay. I got a couple. I won't keep you forever. I got a couple others.
Go for it.
Quality. How do you guys maintain quality? You've got to have, because you kind of have it twofold, right? You have to have quality coming in, and you touched on it a little bit earlier.
Yep.
And your product has to go out. Your quality has to be there on the product going out too. So how do you maintain that? That's got to be a lot. It's got to be a big part of the day, if you will.
And not only that, let me because I want to follow up on that too, Scott, because I was thinking about this earlier, how the quality has changed with technology over the years since you started. Right?
Yeah. So several things. Let me see. So first and foremost, I mentioned it earlier, a certificate of analysis, a CFA. So each batch that's produced goes up to Hartwick College in New York State. Their Craft Beverage Institute does a full battery of tests on that. So we get everything from protein to enzyme package to extract, all of that. Full battery of tests done there. In-house, we're able to do friability, moisture, color, flavor. And so that's kind of me and the lab team doing some of that basic QA/QC up front. What we can do in the lab is typically enough to give it a thumbs up, thumbs down to go to market. If we have concerns about a given batch, we can sort of push it off to the side, put it in the sort of a holding pattern until we get lab data. And then that's really kind of the final, is this okay to release? Is this true to brand? Go forth and conquer. Here we go. So that's a big piece of it there is really a lot of testing. The front end testing, like we talked about earlier, is really crucial. We don't let bad barley in the building. So that helps us sort of put a floor under a lot of what we're trying to accomplish. And then it's really just, some of it's basic. It's just good housekeeping, keeping a clean malt house keeps the bugs at bay. If there's nothing for them to eat on the floor, they don't proliferate, and so it's really a team effort. Everybody kind of eyes on the prize every day. We have an adage that's completely worn out, but if it's just simple, it's see something, say something,
Yeah.
It can be a torn bag in the racks. It can be a a temperature range that's out of spec when we're in germination. It can be a funky smell and coming out of a germinating batch. It's our team really that's driving there. I mean, everyone's got their eyes and ears and nose open at all times.
And any one of those things you just mentioned could be a small thing, right? Just in passing, but a small detail, but it could affect the final product.
Exactly. I mean, too much dust is a perfect place for bugs to hang out and build a new family, and then their family builds a family, and
And you know what? And not that you have to give any examples, but
yeah.
I would imagine, like anything else, you've had to learn the hard way a few times over the years, right?
Oh yeah. No, we call it the halo. And basically if a super sack bag has a bug infestation and they're really crunching on that material, the dust will come out of that bag and form a halo around the pallet. And that pallet is immediately going out the door into the trash can. So,
Yeah.
Mhm.
So just little things like that, looking for, it's just basic hygiene, and it's just knowing what the correct portfolio of smells should be like in the malt house.
Yeah. Or lack of them, right? If you don't smell something going
Sometimes
on.
if you don't smell something, something's wrong.
Something's
Right.
wrong. You guys, and tell me, Plow to Pint Pilsner.
Yes.
It's something you guys developed with Full Steam Brewery. Is that kind of a private label beer for you guys? What is that exactly?
So Plow to Pint is kind of Full Steam's ethos that we sort of play into really nicely. We've worked on a ton of projects over the years with Full Steam. Really, they love the fact that we're able to tie individual lots of barley back to a given, or malt back to a given farm. And so whether it's Pilsner or whether it's, with this Regenified stuff, they've released an ESB, they've released an Oktoberfest, and then we're doing for North Carolina Craft Brewers Conference, we're doing a Belgian Pale that I'm really excited about. But again, it's about having that two-way street of dialogue between maltster and brewer, where we're able to get these sort of custom built projects put together. And that's just not something big malt houses can do. It's just sort of like, here's our catalog. This is what we got. Pick from the menu. There's no opportunity to say, well, I'd really love to have a lot that's just Farmer John's stuff from this year, and I'm like, all right, well, give me a couple of weeks and let me make a floor batch and we'll do that. What's your target SRM on color? Okay, cool. We'll add some heat to the curing step and we'll make you what you want, and those types of projects just satisfying for all involved, in the finished beer, especially if it wins a medal or something like that, like
sure. Yeah.
Feels good.
Yep. Maybe it's part of the tour. I saw something somewhere along the way about sensory training. And I don't know if it was sensory training for staff, or was it sensory training for like people taking tours, or was that two different things, or is it the same thing?
All of the above. Yeah. So that's the hot steep method.
Okay.
So this was something developed probably 7 or 8 years ago. A lady named Lindsay Barr, who used to be with New Belgium and has now launched a company called Draft Lab, has really been at the bleeding edge of this. Basically what Draft Lab is it sort of bolts so a hot steep is basically, like I said, the same concentration of malt tea that a brewer would create in a brew house. But the trick with Draft Lab is gives you a true to brand sort of analysis questionnaire to go through. For example, if it was that Southern Select I was talking about earlier, our British Pale Ale malt, it's like, it's going to ask you, is it in this color range? Okay, cool. Am I picking up bready biscuit notes? Okay, excellent. Am I getting a little bit of like fruit? Am I getting a little bit of toast? Okay, cool. It's going to walk me through all of those sensory sort of check boxes to arrive at the ultimate question, is this true to brand? And so we use that in-house for your QA/QC. We use it in sales as a way of saying, here's our Pilsner malt up against, XYZ malt house's Pilsner malt. How do you feel about ours? Is it different, better? Do you not care? All right. But really, to answer your question though, with training, the most effective thing that we found with like bartenders is helping them connect dots, is saying, here's what Riverbend did. Here's the farmer. Here's how we made this malt. This, pale malt is in this style beer that you're pouring. Here's the connection side by side. Do you pick it up? And that's when the light bulb goes off and they're like, oh, wow. Okay. Now I understand what malt does. It's not just the sugar source, but it's giving all these other nuances to the beer along with the yeast and hops. Of course, it's like, it really helps drive home the role that malt plays. I always give this analogy. So it's like, if beer ingredients were the Led Zeppelin crew, right? So malt is John Bonham in the background, just banging on the drums, doing an incredible job, holding things down. He's not always the one you talk about when people talk about Led Zeppelin. They talk about Robert Plant with his shirt off, and that's hops, right? That's Robert Plant, and he gets all the show-stopping groupies and all the headlines being the hops. But without John Bonham, Led Zeppelin doesn't exist. So, so that's kind of the storyline I like to tell when it comes to where malt fits into the craft beer spectrum.
Who is Jimmy Page in that analogy? Yeast.
So maybe if Robert Plant is the sexy dry hop, Jimmy Page is like still the sexy bitterness hop that's playing like right behind.
That's great. That is great.
John Paul Jones is who?
John Paul Jones would be, maybe he's the yeast. So still very important, still laying down a crucial part of the rhythm section.
Right. What's the saying? The sum of the parts?
Yes.
Whatever exactly. That is, right?
The sum is greater than its parts.
The individual parts, exactly. Yeah. But I do love the John Bonham analogy. It keeps everything together, keeps everything on time and the whole thing.
Right. The soul of beer.
Totally. Look, I got a million more. We got to let you go here soon. But one other thing, talk about your team, just your team in general. Like you talked about, you're able to do different things now, or they want to buy you to do other things. But talk about your team. Like, you've got to have a wonderful team as a whole.
Yeah.
And not only that, let me also expand on that question. How has your team grown from when you first started to now?
Oh, geez. Yeah. So when we started, our first employee came in and we're just like, we don't really have a job for you other than to just help us lift things. And he was like, cool, I'm in. This sounds great. And I'm like, all right. Come on, show up at 8:30 tomorrow morning. So, it started from just Brian and I. Now we're like 16 or 17 folks strong, covering the Southeast in sales. We have somebody at the malt house 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our production crew is great. Like everybody else, it was hell going through the pandemic and then the great resignation after that. But thankfully, things have settled in. We've got a beautiful group of folks that come in and just work their butts off every day for us. It's a lot of the same stuff, but again, there's just enough nuance that if you fall asleep and get complacent, something's going to go completely off the rails. So thankfully, like, everyone has been with us long enough to watch things go off the rails, and they all are dialed now. So it's great.
Yeah.
It's, when we first got started with these GKVs, think about it like train cars lined up, so it's like we steep one batch, push it into batch 2, steep the next one, push it into batch 3, and so on and so forth. If something screws up in one of those, they all just mash together, and then you have 100,000 pounds of train wreck on your hands. Mm-hmm. And again, we were talking about Helene earlier, speaking of 100,000 pound train wrecks. When the power went out and the water went out, that's exactly what we had in Helene. And I can't say enough about our crew. I mean, they showed up the next day. I don't even know how some of them got there. One guy showed up too early, actually, and then trees fell down and he couldn't get back to his house. And so it was just amazing to watch everybody come together. I mean, we cooked communal meals together for a week and a half as power was coming back on and the city was getting its legs back under it. And it was fantastic. I mean, I'll never forget, I showed up, one of our guys, Moses, he was standing guard over the malt house. And I was like, how long have you been here, Moses? And he was like, all day. And I'm like, wow, thanks, bud. That was way above the Call of Duty.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard, the National Guard helicopters are overhead. Like, I think we're okay, but it was
Yeah.
that kind of dedication that just showed up over and over
Yeah.
again after Helene. So
Yeah, and obviously you're referencing Hurricane Helene that happened,
yeah,
in Asheville. I mean, it devastated a lot of Asheville a year ago.
it did.
I mean, when you look back now, almost a year later, I mean, are you all still impacted at all by that in the local community?
We come back strong. A couple of our customers, their facilities were just truly wiped off the map, so they're
Yeah.
not back. But as a town, I mean, I think we've snapped back pretty well. We're a resilient group. I'm still hearing that tourism numbers are down double digits from where they were last summer, which isn't awesome, but we're having a great leaf season. I mean, I'm almost, it sounds silly, but I'm thankful to be stuck in traffic some days. I know that means people are visiting us and they're excited to see the foliage and hike in the woods and then come back and drink and eat in our breweries and restaurants. And I think that's definitely a beautiful thing. I mean, Asheville's been a tourism town for well over 100 years now. So
Yeah.
if that's not happening, then something's wrong. It feels off, so people are coming back. Kudos to everybody in the community for rallying around and rebuilding and getting restarted. I was just meeting with the guys from Zillicoa earlier today, and their story is just really just one of grit. I mean, they just went back at it before anyone knew if they could rebuild. They just started rebuilding and said,
Yeah,
we're going to do this, And I think that's emblematic of a lot of folks around town that we're just going to go do this and rebuild and remain the really amazing place that we've always been.
it is my favorite beer city. It is for so many reasons. The beer is fantastic. The ability to walk from one to another in so many is such a huge factor too. It's a great town, Steve. We're going to get you there soon.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful.
It's a good spot.
Yeah.
The people are wonderful, and it's anytime you can have an Asheville day where you get up and go hiking or biking or fishing and then come back and have a beer at somewhere in the River Arts around 3 or 4 o'clock, a great meal, and then go see some live bluegrass. Like, I think that's just as good as it gets.
It is. I love it. I'm gonna end on this. So Steve might have some more, but tell us something about malt. I've said that 3 times, haven't I? Tell us something about malt we may not have known if we haven't covered it already.
Oh, what can I say? New barley varieties take over a decade to create.
Wow.
So I mentioned Avalon, I think, from Virginia Tech. That variety began life at a roundtable discussion in 2013, 2014. And we did not have commercial quantities of it until 2023. It was worth the wait. It's an awesome variety, but 10 years.
What as a follow up to that, real quick?
Yeah.
What causes that? Is it just red tape? Is it just kind of developing it?
It's Mother Nature. So we don't.
Yeah.
We don't use GMO techniques. So it's old school genetic crosses, and then they basically select the strongest offspring over the course of several crop years. And the great thing about Avalon is during that 10-year trial, it went through hot years, dry years, wet years. It got all the stressors put on it. And so the variety that made it to the finish line from that type of brutal trial is tough. And the flavor profile is great. So it works for maltsters, brewers, and farmers.
So at the end of the day, after the decade, you've got a good product.
We've got something good. And we've got lots of his brothers and sisters waiting in the wings to be the next thing. So we've basically created a new genetic pool of southeastern grown malting barley varieties to work with for the foreseeable future.
Well, Brent and Steve, you may have something. Brent, you've taught us so much. I'm telling you, I've got 100 more questions. We'll have you back on if you'll come back on with us at some point. This was fantastic.
You bet.
Absolutely fantastic. And I'm blown away. Like, I have goosebumps just from what we've learned today. I swear.
Awesome. My work here is done then.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what? You'd be proud.
If only my wife said that after spending an hour and a half with me.
Oh, there you go. We see what you did there. No, you know what? You know what, Scott? I have questions, but as you said, we're going to save them for the next time. I'm going to go back on their website at riverbendmalt.com because there is so much on that website to check out, so much information. I would just tell people, go there if you want to learn more. If you haven't heard enough on this podcast, go there and you will hear and see a lot more from you guys. That is Brent Manning. He is the co-founder of them, and we certainly appreciate it, man. Thank you for coming today.
Appreciate you guys.
On the Brewery Underground podcast.
And spending so much time and sharing so much knowledge with us.
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
From Nashville, we say cheers to you, sir.
Cheers. Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Brent.